So my name is Clémence Boutry. I work in Michael's group in Fribourg, Switzerland, in the group cultivation technique of fruit and berry crops. And in this lecture, we will talk about pest and disease management in commercial variety testing for organic fruit production, with also, like Michael, a focus on apple. So after this lecture, you should be able to answer these two questions. The first one is, what are the principles of plant protection in organic farming? And the second one is how to control the main diseases and pests in organic apple production. We only have time to discuss the two main diseases and the two main pests. But if you are interested to go further, I suggest you go to the BioFruitNet website, another European project that ended, where we did an e-learning course for pome fruit, stone fruit, and citrus fruit. And each course is divided in pest control, disease control, varieties and rootstocks, and functional agrobiodiversity. So you can just watch it. It's all recorded online for free. So now coming back to this lecture and to our variety testing at FIBL, we have all varieties tested under two different management systems. So the first one is the standard organic plant protection, with also standard cultivation measures, and we have 2 times 5 trees. And then the second management system is the reduced organic plant protection, or so-called low input, and also minimal cultivation measures, where we have 2 times 3 trees. So it's the same plot, we just divided it in two. And the standard plant protection is there to see what is the agronomic potential under like ideal conditions, let's say, or the most we can do. And the reduced plant protection or low input treatment is to see what is the genetic potential of the variety. Now, what does it mean concretely, low input? Here you see the two most important cultivation measures, which are flower thinning and fruit thinning to avoid alternate bearing. And this is only done in the standard treatment and not in the reduced one. And then for diseases, you see the most important is apple scab, also in bold. The treatment start in March and go up to the harvest. All plant protection is stopped a bit, some days or weeks before the harvest to avoid residues. So that's why you can see it stops there before the harvest. And from June on, which corresponds to the secondary phase of the scab, we don't do any treatments anymore in the low input. So we only cover the primary phase, also called the ascospore phase of the scab. And usually the other important diseases, including powdery mildew, Marsanine apple blotch, sooty blotch, and the post-harvest diseases, it follows the same principle. We don't do anything from June on in the low input. Now we go to the block on plant protection strategy in organic farming. There is a pyramid. We always try to implement first preventive measures before we go on to the curative measures. So on the bottom, the base is nature conservation measures. This includes the land use or biotope networks. Then one level up is the cultural and management practices, including the choice of cultivars or the location. Then we have the functional biodiversity, for example, flower strips, companion plants that enhance antagonists against pests. And then follows the curative measures. This is the biocontrol, where we can release beneficial organisms. And then the last instance would be the direct control with insecticides or fungicides like pheromones or physical measures, meaning like barriers, physical barriers. So now we will go from the lowest level to the uppermost level, and I will give you some examples now in the food production. So the lowest level is very broad. It's just nature conservation measures, meaning like flowering resources nearby the orchard, structures like refuge, habitat networks, or also no herbicide use over a large area. So this is the basis, but it's not sufficient as a single measure. So we go one level up. It's cultural management practice. Here, the example of pruning and the effect on a pest, which is the rosy apple aphid, which causes malformations of fruit if there is a severe attack. And the aphids are protected and cared for by ants. And they are also carried by ants into different parts of the tree. So the ant in this case is also a pest for us. And there is like an ant highway which follows the stem of the tree. And if through the pruning you create some better light conduction and some more space along the central axis, so the stem, so more light comes in and it dries faster, and it also interrupts the ant highway, so you have less aphid damage on your tree. The second example here is for cherry. The disease Monilla laxa, which is a brown fruit rot. A measure that really helps is sanitation. So this is the case for most fungal diseases, that when you remove like fruit mummies or attacked parts of the tree, that you can reduce the disease pressure. Here you can see that on the graph on the bottom, that for control trees, no fruit mummies have been removed, and you can also see that from there on the disease spreads. Now, of course, it's tricky to remove all mummies, so you need it's really time intensive, I would say. Another preventive measure belonging to the cultural management practice is using weather protection systems, so you can cover your trees to protect them from precipitation, as most fungal diseases need leaf wetness to germinate and then infect the tree. Here again, I have the example for stone fruit. So on cherries, also like covering is a preventive measure against fruit rot, Monilla fruit rot. Then the next level is the functional biodiversity. So you can implement perennial wildflower strips in your orchard to attract and serve as habitat for beneficials. Here on top, you have the example of the hoverfly. You see the adult needs pollen and nectar from flowers to both like survive, get energy, but also to have enough proteins to produce the eggs from which the larvae hatch. And actually the larvae is our aphid antagonist, our beneficial that feeds on the aphids, and aphids are one of the main pests in all fruit crops. Then you can also release beneficials, and you can not only like promote them with like habitat, but you can also actively release them. Here, two examples. One is the samurai wasp, which parasitizes the eggs of the brown marmorated stink bug, which is a upcoming new pest, invasive species. And you also have on the other parasitoid wasps that you can release for different aphids. And then to the last instance, direct control with plant protection products. Here you have to look at the specifications and authorizations per country, because it's regulated per country. Like, of course, you can have regulations on EU level, but then each country can have even more strict regulations. Here's some examples of categories of plant products. You can have plant extracts, for example, quassia, neem oil, pyretrum. Now with the little star, you have here in this case, insecticides with a broad spectrum, not only, that are toxic also to non-target organisms. So you should be careful when to spray. For example, you should never spray when you have open flowers. Should it be on the tree or open flowers from a flower strip? Then the next category could be microorganisms, including like one agent, very famous agent, Bacillus thuringiensis, or viruses. You can have extracts from Actinobacteria. It's called spinosad, but it's one of the most killing insecticide, should be avoided to all cost. And then you have minerals, soaps, paraffin oil, and also pheromones for mating disruption. Here, as I mentioned before, you can have direct physical measures. Here's a net on apples. This is against the main pest, which is the codling moth. So you have a physical barrier between the adult moth and the fruit where the moth lays the larvae, which feeds then on the apple. But this is a very also cost-intensive measure. Now we move on to the presentation of the two major diseases and the life cycle, and also how to control them, because you should know your enemy to best fight it. So we have apple scab, Venturia inequalis, and we have powdery mildew, Potosphaera leucotricha. So apple scab, the fungus overwinters in the fallen leaves on the ground. And then in early spring, when you have precipitation, and when the spores are mature inside the fruiting bodies in the leaf, they are released. And so it comes to primary infection. Primary infection can happen all from green tip to petal fall. So you see the stages of the apple, the phenological stages in the little pictures on the right. And then from late spring, summer on, you can have secondary infections. And then it goes much faster, because each primary infection can cause like secondary infections, and then it all multiplies. So here you should remember apple scab overwinters in the leaves. Very important for the management later on. Symptoms and damage. You can have leaf damage. It's the most common damage. When you have a really high pressure of the disease, it can happen that you also have fruit symptoms. And for leaf scab, you can have primary and secondary symptoms. You can distinguish them. It's and it's these round, brownish, oily spots. And then you have fruit scab. Of course, I put an inserted picture with very severe infection. Usually you wouldn't see this in a commercial apple orchard. And then you can also have fruit storage scab. So the scab infection would still happen in the field, but then after storage, you can have more of the symptoms on the fruit. So what can you do against apple scab? You have preventive measures that have two important preventive measures. One is to reduce the inoculum, the starting inoculum of the pathogen. And the second would be to reduce moisture in the foliage, so make it less favorable for the pathogen to spread. So reduction of inoculum can be done by promoting the degradation of the fallen leaves in autumn. You can see on the pictures. In picture A, you have brushes to brush all the leaves in the middle of the tree row. And then in picture B, you would you would see the difference of the brushed side and the non-brushed side. And in picture C, you go with the machine and you shred the leaves, which helps or fasten the degradation. And then to reduce moisture in the foliage, you have different approaches. You can, of course, you should plant your trees in a location with good airflow. This always helps to so that the foliage dries quicker. And then with pruning, you can also help to have an airy crown structure, and you should also look with the fertilization that you have a balanced growth, not too much growth. And using drip irrigation versus sprinklers also helps to reduce the moisture in the foliage. Now, if the preventive measures, this is just the base. Now, in commercial variety testing and also commercial apple production, usually you have you use forecasting models. Here you have one example of a forecasting model to time your sprayings to be the most effective. So now I will explain you what you see here. So the forecast models has data, weather data, combined with the phenological stage of the apple tree, and then it processes this and gives you the infection risk at a certain time point. So in the lowest bar, you can see the rainfall in dark blue and the leaf wetness in light blue. Then here you have how much spores, so ascospores, you have like in the potential in your in the leaves, and the stock, of course, decreases over time because they are released. And then in the upper graph, you can see, so the blue line is from where on the forecast or the modeling is done. And it calculates the risk of infection. You can see here releases of ascospore at the yellow bar, and then in red, the infection, the risk of infection. And depending on the height, you can categorize it in light infection, medium or heavy infection. And then for plant protection measures, you have preventive treatments, which are done just before the infection or the forecasted infection period, or stop treatments, and these are done just after, usually when you couldn't do a preventive treatment. Maybe it was raining so much that you had, or it was unforeseen, maybe the weather changed super quickly, or you couldn't simply do it at the proper time. But this is very limited in organic. So this stop treatment, you only have a short window where you can still spray something that the germinated spores are killed still on the leaf before they enter in the leaf. And plant protection products that are used in organic farming and against apple scab include sulfur, so wettable sulfur, lime sulfur, potassium bicarbonate, and copper. Now, powdery mildew, so the second most important disease. As opposed to apple scab, it overwinters in the diseased buds. There's also a primary infection happening in early spring. And then you also have secondary infections happening in summer. These are the symptoms on leaves. So very early here, you still have some flower buds here. You have this white velvet layer of mycelium on the leaves. And with heavy infections, you can also have attack of the fruits. So management, again, because it's a fungus, reduction of inoculum and reduce moisture in the foliage. Here, as it overwinters in the twigs, in the buds, you should remove the infested shoots as soon as you see them, usually in spring, but also in winter, during winter pruning. And direct control, usually the products that are sprayed against apple scab also have a an effect on powdery mildew, but specific treatments against powdery mildew include products based on sulfur. Now, the two main pests in apple production or in apple variety testing are the codling moth and the rosy apple aphid. So the codling moth lays the eggs on the surface of a leaf or fruit, from which the larvae develops and enters the fruit, and this is the actual damage. It's the fruit damage. The pupae can overwinter in under the bark or in nearby debris, or could also overwinter in like bamboo sticks that you use to hold your trees, or wooden pallets that you use for harvesting, or all these kinds of things. Here the symptoms, very typical for the codling moth, is this reddish discoloration of the skin around the hole, because you have all kinds of moths that have larvae that can attack the fruit, but look out for this red discoloration around the entrance of the larvae. And the larvae feeds itself through the middle to the core of the apple. Monitoring is usually done with pheromone traps, as seen on the right picture. So there is a pheromone that attracts the adults, and there is a sticky leaflet inside the trap where the adults stick to. And so usually you would go once per week, control your trap and count the number of adults you have there. And then if the threshold of maximum adults per trap is exceeded, you would spray something. And over the years, you can say if your orchard has a high pressure or not of codling moth. And in case of high pressure, you might have to combine different measures to get it under control. So the preventive measures include the mating disruption, is when you have pheromones distributed in the orchard, either through these red strips that you can hang in the trees, or you also have dispensers that spray the pheromone in the air. And so this mimics the pheromone of the female, and then the male is attracted to this fake pheromone and doesn't find the female, and so there is no mating and therefore no egg and no larvae. Also very important is the removal of infested fruits, the preservation of the natural enemies, which are, for example, the earwigs or the spiders, and the birds and the bats also. Then direct control can be done either through a physical barrier with a net, or something which is very common, or the most common, I would say, is the application of a virus, the granulovirus, which only targets the larvae. So you spray it on the fruits, on the maturing fruits, in an interval of 8 to 10 days from, let's say, end of May, June on until harvest. Why do you have to apply it every 8 to 10 days? It's because it's inactivated through UV light. And so when the larvae hatches from the egg and starts to feed on the apple, it ingests the virus and dies. So it's very specific to this pest. And now our last pest, the rosy apple aphid. So as Michael mentioned, you have a whole range of aphids. The most damaging one is the rosy apple aphid, or let's say the most common and damaging, because the apple woolly aphid is maybe even more damaging, but the occurrence is less. It's very specific to the orchard. more bound to the location. So as most aphids, the rosy apple aphid has 2 hosts. There's the main host, the apple, but there is also a summer host, which is usually a herb. So in spring, you have the fundatrices hatching from the eggs, and then they start multiplying on the apple tree. And this is where the damage happens from spring to summer. And then in summer, the winged aphids migrate to the secondary host, in this case, the plantago. And it stays there the whole autumn and winter, just coming back to lay the eggs on the tree. So the time spent on the secondary host can vary depending on, I don't know, the climate, the species. This is the damage of the rosy apple aphid. Severe curling of the leaves, especially of the young shoots. And under heavy attack, you can have malformation of fruits through the sucking of, because the aphids suck on the leaves, but also on the growing fruits, and then it leads to these malformations. So you should regularly inspect your trees and see if you have if you can detect first aphids. There is a saying, one aphid is one aphid too much. So because one fundatrice can lay many aphids, and then they reproduce exponentially, and you can rapidly have a massive problem with aphids. So you inspect your tree from early spring on, and when you have curling, usually it's too late, because you can see here in the curled leaf, there's already a massive colony under this leaf. What can you do? As for every pest, the functional biodiversity is very important. So the enhancement of the predator community, including chrysopids, coccinellids, anthochorids, spiders, through flower strips, hedgerows, cover crops. You can see a ladybug larvae on feeding on aphids, for example. Also, the removal of infested shoots helps to a limited degree. And then you have direct control with two. Yeah, we have two methods of action. You have the neem extract, which is taken up by the leaf, and then when the aphid suck on the leaf, it takes up the insecticide and dies. And then you have the other ones, the mineral oil, the pyretrum, the quasins, that their efficacy is through direct contact with the aphids. So for example, usually pyretrum would be combined with soaps. So soaps already soften or make the aphid more vulnerable, because it attacks the skin or the wax layer of the aphid. And so the pyretrum is the one actually killing them. It has easier access to the aphid. And of course, this is interesting because then you need less of the more toxic insecticide. So now we have that was my lecture, and now I'm open for question if you have any.